Welcome everyone to today's episode and more serious work. In one of the last PS4 videos here, you have seen at the end that we run into problems with available memory due to the second stage installer of T2 extracting to more than 256 megabyte of live file system. So we had to optimize this, and this was on my to-do list already for quite some time. I think I showed already that the installer lives here in target share install, and the way this is building is we have here a second stage creation at the end of the whole target build. So whole target build being bootstrapping and compiling all the packages of the system. So we have here a second stage build, and the reason why we are not simply mounting the installer media is that historically this was optical media like disks, and in case of CDs over a decade ago you had to swap them anyway, but even today it is still convenient to be able to swap the installer media in case of, or load this from network and such. And the reason why 256 megabyte today is not big enough anymore is because as computers advanced, we also put here more and more stuff in there, and naturally not only this, also these packages became bigger and bigger. So while historically we had here very little, nowadays we put there all kind of networking stuff from IP route to, by the way, why do we have the again ROMFS? Some things we are also having here just for system rescue and backup reasons. Not only the full LVM2 suite here, but also maybe smart mount tools and whatnot, OpenSSH to log into other systems or such. And while this may have fit a decade ago into 256 megabyte of memory, things also became bigger. So while OpenSSH may be, let's say, half a megabyte a decade ago, now it may be a megabyte, as each year more features were added and so on. And we have here a small second stage that is including way less, but the problem is nobody was using this, so this is actually broken. I noticed this already some time ago, and I did not fix this immediately because I had better things to do. And the way this small stage works is that we have a very specific set of programs. So instead of packing here 200 megabytes worth of software, we only pack a handful that maybe is 5 megabyte or so. But the problem is that nobody tested this, so there are now in the meantime some vital things missing, so even the installer would not work properly anymore, as nobody ever tested this. And even what I tried to do here the other day is I thought, okay, nowadays we can afford more than 5 megabyte or so. Let's create the small second stage the same way as the big second stage, the regular second stage, by just using this package map here and removing everything we really don't need. But the problem is even this still was maybe 40 megabyte or so. That would have worked for the PS3, but not for something like the Spark Station or some old 486. While I do not care so much about 486, still being able to use this on, yeah, probably not 16 megabyte, but maybe 32 or 48 megabyte Spark Station would obviously be nice to have. So I did not commit this. I started a package map small, and I did not commit this, I reverted this. So what we are going to do now is change the small second stage to include more, just a little bit, just that it works again. And by the way, I see here, this is probably also already a typo. This is not PowerPC, this should be PowerPC, and this should also be 64. So even fixing here a bug while at it. Here, so let's add here a little bit more stuff that we're missing. So I've worked already for this for some hours and committed this already. So the first thing I did here was change this indeed for the PowerPC stuff to include the Mac F disk and P disk only for PowerPC builds again. Somehow this conditional was there but broken. As you can see, this should not be PPC but PowerPC. Then I hope you guys can read this unified diff format. This basically is just here the coordinates in the file. This is line number 111. Removing 9 lines, adding 9 lines, and this minus here are lines removed, this plus here are lines added. So I change here also to create more directories like this, and also user bin. Historically we had here symlinking bin and sbin, but I wanted to get rid of this. This symlink trickery is not really necessary and only complicates things. And also while it's this conditional, of course, only should move one file. So I thought I can also optimize this a little bit just for the fun of it. Not to check here the same file we are looking for over and over again, but just run these other conditionals when the first one wasn't found. Next, I actually had here a bug. So this was not fully working what I did here, because then I test booted this and it wasn't working, and there were some dynamic libraries missing, and they were missing because we grep here for this dynamic libraries if we need them in the small second stage. And as I removed the symlink trickery, this was not finding all required libraries anymore because we were not looking in sbin and user s and bin. So we need to check those. And then I also figured it was also annoying in the small stage to not being able to use the arrow keys for proper command line editing. So I also include here now this term info L Linux for the Linux Virtual Console to have some proper bash editing features. This kind of things take a little bit of time. You test it, you find things, how they work, what is missing. And I figured when I make a video of 5 hours editing and testing, this might be a little bit too boring, but maybe leave in the comments below if you want to see a live stream of this, of trial and error and testing around. Next, I realized test booting this, I could not create a file system because we had here MKE2FS, but this MKE2FS was not a tool checked and used in our installer module. So while this was there, our installer wouldn't use it. I thought I better add this regular mkfs.x3. This was also x2. I thought in the meantime it's probably at least someone wants journaling, so I thought it's at least x3. I think this was slightly smaller. Also for things like the Spark Station, it might be slightly favorable to use x3 than more memory hungry x4. So I will personally probably use something like XFS or so. I think this was for me often a little bit better performing on vintage systems, and I think I remember this was a little bit smaller and more compact, readable, nicer code. I also changed this Arch check here for this Mac fdisk tools to PowerPC star. Actually, I think this needs double brackets. Not sure if I did this later. Sometimes you type something and then test it later and only later realize it didn't work. As you can see here from the subversion diffs, I committed this in steps, so there is some history and you can also browse this yourself. Next, I realized quite some more stuff was missing that is used in our installer. I got there some command not found warnings, and also the packager was not working. As I said, we use a set standard. So nowadays we probably want to add set standard to the small stage, and here just some stuff that was used in our installer scripts that was not found. It's probably nice to have that things work. As I said a minute ago, I made here this change to grep for this dynamic libraries, but this still wasn't working. And in my infinite wisdom, I forgot here this / for really grepping in this file. This kind of mistakes you still make after a decade ago. However, I should have only committed this after full testing, but that's what you get working late night and such. And also, I figured in the meantime, this text installer module was not very nice, and I thought we can afford this few kilobyte of dialog stone installer module, and I probably added here this dialog while at it. Here, here's dialog. Dialog is quite big. Let's see how big is it even on the system user bin, maybe also not with SVN there. Bin dialog, quite big, nearly 100K on x86. And does it need any fancy libraries? Yeah, and curses maybe a little bit bigger. So yeah, but adding things like this, we make things bigger and bigger, and then it's not 5 megabyte anymore. Then eventually it is 10 megabyte, and this is how you make things bigger and bigger. Yeah, this curses alone is 300K or so. So there you see where all our space is going. This was this change, but the installer was still not working. You see, this is quite some hours of trial and error testing. And next, I also took a look in this init script. This init is the init script that we are booting as init process in the installer stage. And first of all, I noticed there were really annoying warnings of this file system not being able to be mounted. This was because we simply tried here all the file systems in proc file system, and in our init.rd we already used disk type, so I copied the code from the init.rd to disk type. Here's a best guess file system and try this first, and only if that fails, the crop file systems in reverse order. And this usually gets rid of this annoying not being able to be mounted warning. Although we are not using set standard yet, I prepared to in the future also convert the second stage of the installer to use set standard. And then I also renamed this. I figured it might be nice to have kind of 8 character file names, and I did not like the second stage underscore name here so much. I renamed the second stage to stage 2, a little bit nicer and cleaner in my opinion, and also changed then here this looking for second stage obviously to stage 2. And as we renamed these files, I figured I name the base file not second stage small, but we name it second stage for the small one and the second stage extended for the bigger one. And also I noticed this was asking for whether to use this or the other second stage, or by number 1 or 2, or enter a file name. And actually, so it said here enter file name. I can even show you file name, enter number or imaged file name. And reading this code, I noticed here is actually no conditional for this entered file name to work, and I tested this and for sure this didn't work. So I fixed this also while at it, and this is what we do here, this eval. If the number in this loop doesn't match, then last we just assign here this variable name to the input for this manually input file name to work. You see all the many details that can go wrong. Here I messed up the white spaces. Usually this doesn't happen for me, but as it is so often, I make a YouTube video and I mess up the white space. Usually I'm pretty careful to format this. I think this was also white space here. So much to, you want this white space clean, and then you mess it up for the YouTube video. Then the packager was still not working. I could still not install the binary package. The installer would simply not find the packages, and I had to further analyze why this was happening. And while continuing to improve this, next I did a little bit further optimization, because I was still analyzing why this installer was not working. Even though I knew the small installer was broken, I was always thinking when I next touch this and repair this and get it working again, I should also actually change this to make it so that the bigger second stage is based on the small second stage. That would save us another 5 megabyte on the install media, because all the files were duplicates. All the small second stage files were also again included in the big second stage image. So I started to change this here to move the files over. So of course again added here some more stuff, making the small stage even bigger, like UDEF, because I figured it's a little bit annoying not to have UDEF in there. For example, I created a partition and the device did not show up. So ideally, although it makes the small second stage even bigger, obviously it's very nice to have UDEF in there for this to work. And then I changed here copy to move the files over, not copy it to the small second stage, but move them. Of course, this requires changing the extraction to extract both images. Then the extended big second stage needs to extract also the small second stage, but this saves us another 5, or depending how big we make the small second stage on the installer media. Also change this here, instead of copy, it's moving the required libraries, and here we no longer copy. Now we move this over. And first, this is already the second attempt. The first I did not commit immediately. I noticed that again we had all the shared libraries missing. This was because these were symlinks. So I use read link to read the target of the symlink, and if this is a symlink, we also move the symlink, so an extra loop for that. All the many details to take care of developing such kind of things. And this is also why it doesn't take 1 hour to develop something like this. It takes then 4 or 5 hours to develop and test everything. So then at the end I moved this here before we were creating the second stage, the big one in the beginning. Now, however, we move the files out of it, so we create both of them at the end, and we also change this init to extract more than one image. So I also nicely changed this message, like file names, that you can specify more than one. If this is not the small stage, if the user chooses the extended stage, for example, there's something following the stage name here in front of the tar, then we also add here, this here is already preparing for another compressor, so I don't hardcode their tar bset2, but extract the full extension there with this shell variable globbing there, and then eval this, and this again did not work immediately. This required a second try, because without the escaped quotes here, this would not evaluate for the multiple names with white space in the middle. And then I also had to rework the extraction here to loop over the return file name, which may now be 2 or more theoretically, and extract either network load here with fget or extract directly multiple image files. And next something broke. Next I had to pause the recording and reconnect to the server because Wi-Fi broke. So much to why do I like Ethernet. The next change here is that I figured it's probably also nice to have tar. I also figured out why the installer didn't work, because I was extracting the tarball name, the compressor, like bset2 or set standard, from the etc config. We also had to include the etc SDE config in the small second stage. I also changed, instead of copying, moving the fs tab, and then additionally the SDE config to have this installer being able to determine our configured binary compressor format. So then also the installer started to work again. Also changed then copying this file. The problem was also that we got warnings from tar extracting files that were already there. So this not only makes the installer smaller, it also avoids some warnings on the screen of files that already existed. So at this point I can show you the final result. So for some reason also I could show it to you. So this is the PowerPC image that I could theoretically release. The problem is, while I make this video, I'm not next to the PS3. So I cannot make sure that this works, but I guess it should. The way I tested this was also building a small 486 image. So now I also released a new 486 and AMD 64 image, which is of course also a nice benefit of making this video, to also have new x86 images for you to load and play along at home and use for testing and development. So here is now the 486 as well as the x86 64. And maybe we can, oh, this is slightly smaller, 300. So this is minimal without Xorg, of course relatively nicely small. And due to doing something else the other day, I deleted this locally. I had this already on my machine, but deleted this. So let's copy them again and then resume. But you see how much more work this was than just getting something bootable on the PS3, including quite an afternoon or night fiddling, debugging and half rewriting our small second stage installer image. This was already a little bit overdue for quite some years, but as it is, I always had something better to do. But this is also what we make these YouTube videos for, to finance such kind of nice to have, but not really immediately pressing kind of work. And next I show you what happens with QEMU. So of course I tested this in virtualization with QEMU, and this mostly worked for the x86 images. I will show you the PowerPC. So for the PowerPC I also had to re-enable IBM P series. That was not in the PS3 dev config that I'm currently using. I still need to figure out which of the config settings is required for the PS3 to actually boot with the T2 all modular, all options enabled default config, because this currently also doesn't boot with this open firmware in here. We need to manually specify the kernel init ID, slightly uncomfortable, but not such a big of a problem. I think the last kernel was maybe 4. Does not support. Then we do it like this. And after I added this P series kernel config, it started to boot before it would not boot anything useful, I think, with the PS3 config. So now you see this is command line. So there you see the Linux kernel. By the way, we need to be careful not to get audio dropouts there with this high CPU load on this Microsoft Surface. You see that we have the kernel running, What is our CPU load? Not that we get audio dropouts. If the slope glued piece of Microsoft junk is getting too hot, we get other dropouts while recording. And what is our download here? 7 seconds. Yeah, you see the full system emulation is not the fastest. Obviously x86 virtualization is way faster. But this would work for the initRD testing, but somehow the emulation dies and crashes, or I don't know what, after extracting this initRD, so not yet sure if this 100% works on a real machine on PowerPC. Right now it takes quite a while though. Yeah, there's our other extra. I hope we have audio again, so then that is what I mean. I'm not making this low performance nonsense up. Can't recommend the Surface or other tablets anymore. I will not buy any new tablet for this kind of reasons anymore. So then going to continuing with the x86, the PowerPC would only die anyway, so this is why you can't always test everything in virtualization. E386 CD-ROM, this was T2 minimal 486, and let's use some small amount of memory. I think this should work. At least it worked the last time I tested it. I hope we don't get new other buffer overruns. Because this has a floppy, this does not auto-load. If this doesn't auto-load, you can choose it manually. As you can see, this has a floppy there. Maybe I also code this to skip over floppies. Right now it tries to use removable devices, and I could also run the emulator without floppy though. And then we try the small second stage here. And out of memory. That went well with 128 megabyte. I have to admit I did not test this with so little memory. You think you are done, you make a YouTube video and then you find new things when you thought you had everything implemented. Let's see. You also see that direct x86 virtualization is way faster. Okay, so you see although the small image is really small now, it still requires 128 megabyte of memory. So much to that. How much we increase the size of that. So if you have something significantly smaller, you will need to enable the swap really early there. And we can also check how big the image is now. That is SR0 to MT source. Now we have a 4 MB second stage. Why does it not work? Why does it require so much memory though? It's a little bit crazy. Does this really extract so much? What do we have here even? We have here indeed 124 megabyte. Actually quite crazy compression ratio. So yeah, there you have it. This small image still requires quite some memory. And the only small thing right now is if we use a big image, we get a few warnings that I will not tackle today. The warning we get there is some duplicate directories, but I will not optimize this more. So because these directories are included in both the small and the second stage, I said we move all the files over, but we are not moving directories over. So this is why these directory names are in there. With all these optimizations and changes and everything, this is the only regression drawback we have to live for now until someone works on this and avoids this kind of directories in the second stage. As I said, we now decompress here stage 2 and stage 2 extended. Not only did we fix a small second stage, although we made it slightly bigger, but I guess that is, I think this is what expected these days, a little bit of functionality. If you need something significantly smaller, build your own T2 and remove some stuff there, or activate swap very early, or plug in more memory on a Spark Station 2 or so. I hope you found this interesting and learned something. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Maybe leave in the comments below if you like this style or want to see more live coding style, which I however think might be slightly more boring. Maybe we will do some real live coding stream in the future to chat with you guys. So again, I hope you learned something. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe. And I will notify you all as soon as I had time to test this on the PS3 and then make a video installing this and continuing with graphic hackery. And until then, I hope to see you soon for the next videos to come.